Hey guys, it's Rachel. It is Thankful Thursday. I know that I made a video for you guys on Monday. I was having a lot of problems with having no internet, and also my laptop has kind of been on the brink, which isn't uncommon, and I really need a new one. But I'm going to get my video up today. Well, it's almost Friday actually, so I'm sorry if it's been delayed. I know for some of you it's still Thursday, but I know some of you are ahead of us here in the UK, and so it's Friday. This week we're specifically looking at eating disorders and personality disorders. What I do want to say to you is that I haven't had a chance to watch Ariel's video, so I hope that I'm not too repetitive here. I have a pretty decent idea of how she maybe will have covered the topic, and I just hope that what I'm providing is just some extra information, maybe some personal experience, and is, you know, a video that is actually worth something new in it. So personality disorders, I guess to start with, maybe I should just explain the sort of a bit of terminology really. When you have issues such as an eating disorder, mood disorders including bipolar, obsessive compulsive disorders, they are on what is known as axis 1. Axis has a personality disorder, and within the umbrella of personality disorders are narcissistic personality disorders, histrionic, I think it is, or something like that, personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, probably the one you've heard the most of, an obsessive compulsive personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. I think I might have just repeated that. So they're the ones that I can think of just right now. What I wanted to focus the video on really is borderline personality disorder. What I will mention is that narcissistic personality disorder is also quite commonly diagnosed, usually in men. And narcissistic personality disorder, like a number of other personality disorders, especially borderline personality disorder, quite often have their roots in some degree of abuse in childhood or neglect in childhood. Also issues with self-esteem, self-worth, and that leading to a diagnosis of personality disorder can sometimes be said to have been caused by the environment, but it's also more to do with a trait disorder. So it is expressing that the issue lies within the person, and that perhaps the person was born with certain traits which have led them to have a personality disorder. I know that there are people out there who are diagnosed with personality disorders. What I will say is being diagnosed with an axis 1 diagnosis is that it is often seen as something that a person can attain a degree of recovery within. Within personality disorders, it is perhaps seen that a person can be taught to live with that illness. Now, there has been a lot of research, a lot of papers written concerning the use of CBT in axis 1 diagnosis. So CBT can be used to help treat a number of issues, including eating disorders and anxiety disorders. And what has been found within some of this research is that people who have long-term histories with an eating disorder, with depression, etc., and when I say long-term, I mean kind of over the years, and chronic kind of disorders where a person suffered for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, their whole life, that those people, although might not have personality disorders, perhaps need a form of cognitive behavioural therapy that is specific. Louis, come on. Sorry, the dog's under the bed. That they will expand on a form of cognitive behavioural therapy that is used for personality disorders. That does not mean that the person with a eating disorder, for example, has a personality disorder. What it means is that the researchers, those treating us, are understanding that a long-term mental health problem, enduring eating disorders that have gone on for people's lifespan, which quite often they do, need to be treated in a way that is similar to those who are considered to have personality trait disorders. And so there's been a lot of developments there, and rather than taking CBT as something that is just used for those who have Axis 1 illnesses, that's been broadened and expanded upon. Now, I wasn't ill for a huge amount of time. However, whatever it was that I was dealing with was quite deeply ingrained. Now, there's a lot of research, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, on whether there's a predisposition to eating disorders, etc. What seems to be more important to me is the depth of that illness. Those who are dealing with an Axis 1 diagnosis, and for whatever reason CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, hasn't worked, may then need to explore a form of cognitive behavioural therapy that is for those with more long-standing issues. One of those therapies is Schema therapy. Now, Schema therapy was initially used for those with personality disorders. Those personality disorders most used within Schema therapy have been borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. Now, there's an excellent book that is available which is Schema therapy for personality disorders, and they focus on narcissistic personality disorders and borderline personality disorders. Now, I don't know a huge amount about narcissistic personality disorders. I don't actually know a huge amount about other personality disorders. I understand that under the umbrella of personality disorders come issues like I've spoken about longevity of the illness, about some sort of predisposition, and it being a long-term, lifetime perhaps struggle. Now, the Schema therapy book actually explores narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. It also helps you understand schemas. It helps you, schemas, for those of you who may not know, schemas are core issues, okay? So you might have an abandonment schema, and that means that you need to look at the abandonment issue and work on where that's come from, why you have that feeling. And by looking at how Schema therapy tackles such issues, it really helps you get underneath what core issues you're looking at. So when you have an eating disorder, it's perhaps easy to believe that the problems are to do with food or weight or what have you. Yes, those surface behaviours need addressing, but what is underneath all of that, what is causing all of that, can be understood through schemas, and it's something I actually believe a huge amount in, and it's something I have advised other people in. It's something I have used myself, and so I will put a link to that book. With regards to borderline personality disorder, I'm kind of in two minds about that, and I have quite strong opinions towards how I feel about the disorder. Now, that comes from personal experience of it. It comes from interactions with numerous psychiatrists and therapists over the years, and it also comes from my own work in the field of eating disorders. Personally, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder when I was 21, 22. I understood myself within that disorder when I was diagnosed with it. I related to the criteria, and for a very short period of time it helped me make sense of myself. However, it also didn't help me, and as the time passed I kind of realised that, okay, I can relate to a number of the issues within here, but this isn't what I am, this isn't who I am, and these are where my opinions have come through, how I feel towards diagnoses. And predominantly, I don't tend to ask the people I work with what diagnosis they have. I don't tend to be quick to diagnose them. I tend to look at them as a whole integrated person with a number of different difficulties, a number of different behaviours. And in the group, especially the group I facilitate, I am very wary of the girls or members using behavioural talk, because what I want them to do is understand how they're feeling. So rather than saying, I've done this, and to say, do you know what, today I didn't want to get out of bed. I did get out of bed. Even if you got out of bed to use behaviours, I want them to try and explore some of that. So when you're looking at criteria that comes under a diagnosis, we all know that eating disorder diagnoses are very small. They are very limited in what they have, and it is very rare to find a person who solely has an eating disorder. More often than not, if they've been diagnosed with a personality disorder, it will be borderline personality disorder. Now, borderline personality disorder, some of the criteria: chronic emptiness, use of multiple self-destructive behaviours, alcohol, drugs, eating disorders, self-injury, suicidal ideation, mood swings, impulsiveness within that, and a general overwhelming sort of feeling. I mean, it can also be called emotional. The word's gone out of my head. There is another term for borderline personality disorder, and I can't think what it is right now, but which incorporates that feeling of emotional instability personality disorder, where there is no middle ground for a person. They're sort of racing behaviours, impulsive, very out of control, very reactive. And a lot of people who have an eating disorder do also get diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Now, I mentioned earlier that there's axis 1 and there's axis 2. I personally feel that for borderline personality disorder, it needs to be on an axis 1 and on an axis 2. So if you've got it on an axis 1, you've got somebody who's actively in their eating disorder or who is actively trying to recover, and they manifest symptoms of borderline personality disorder. Now, you have to also remember that some of the core traits within borderline personality disorder are having a kind of angry self, a punishing self, a very detached self, a very anxious, sad, scared child, and then also the healthy adult. The healthy adult is incredibly underdeveloped in the person with borderline personality disorder. However, what I would also say is that within an eating disorder or within depression or within anxiety disorder, those issues are there because the person is dealing with very, very conflicting emotions. So I err on the edge of caution when I meet people or work with people who say they have an eating disorder and borderline personality disorder. And I kind of focus on the eating disorder because I think that it is very hard to know whether a person actually has depression, has a personality disorder, has whatever, when physically they're not well, emotionally they're not well, mentally they're not well, psychologically they're not well, and spiritually they're not well. Now, if you can start to deal with some of that stability, get a person stable with food and weight or what have you, it doesn't mean that they're recovered, it doesn't mean that they're well, but stable, then you can kind of explore what else is going on there. And I think if a person has recovered from an eating disorder and therefore doesn't exhibit any of those borderline traits, they're not on the personality spectrum, they're actually on the axis 1. So for me, it was very much about realising that those behaviours, those reactions, that impulsivity was very much wrapped up in my eating disorder behaviours, eating disorder mindset. And once that was dealt with, once I went through therapy, those things disappeared as well. And so I'm not a person who is incredibly impulsive. I probably am a bit because that's sort of the nature of me anyway, but I am somebody who makes decisions and is kind of that way. And I don't exhibit the traits of that disorder. I don't fit into that disorder. And so it's very difficult to say that I would have a personality disorder because I genuinely don't believe I do. What I do believe happened is that I was very, very ill in all aspects, and that my recovery from that and being treated as a whole person and not as a diagnosis is what, essentially meant I recovered. Recovery is going to be difficult, but things like Schema therapy, the other one used for borderline personality disorder is dialectical behavioural therapy. I can put a link to a really good book for that as well. You can ignore the fact it says borderline personality disorder on the front of it, because DBT is excellent and has been used with great success within eating disorders. So that is really kind of where I'm at. What I do want to say is that in borderline personality disorder, most people who are diagnosed with it have been through abuse, childhood abuse, childhood neglect, have maybe been raped. I wasn't somebody who was abused as a child, but I was raped in later adulthood. So, it doesn't all have to be about a person being abused, and even if they're exhibiting traits of borderline personality disorder, it doesn't mean that they have that disorder. I'm going to leave that now, guys, and get this up. Okay, bye.